the price of the house. Now, let me say this. At the time that Paul was building the house, he did everything that I asked him to do. He was hurting sometimes. When he saw the cabinets that we had in the kitchen, there were 65 individual doors. And suddenly it dawned on him when the cabinet maker was coming to him and telling him what was involved. And then we went through the bow windows. Does everybody know the story of the bow windows? The bow windows were steel windows. And he was going to put aluminum windows in. I got him to put the steel windows in. But I guess the point that I'm getting at is that although he grunted now and then, Paul Huffines kept his word. Absolutely. From start to finish. Now, our house closed on June 4th, 1962. And so I showed up for the closing, and I didn't have the down payment. I'm serious. I did not have the down payment money to complete. So I said, Mr. Huffines says, "You're supposed to have the money here." I said, "Mr. Huffines, I don't have it." He said, "Okay, I'll take care of it." So the next day, Paul Huffines gave me a note for the down payment money. And I executed that, paid it off in about 60 days. But the point is that he was there when I needed him too. So, and the idea of how he brought this project into being at the price that he did, because he was very, very ingenious. He got bricks from the stockyards at a very low price. He had lumber that he got from a special source. He was getting bricks out of Chicago. A lot of the houses are got the Chicago school bricks. These were all off-market items that he had. So at the time then, he got Terrence savings. And let me say this. Paul Huffines knew that you needed major capital to get in the houses. And so what he did was he created false prices for every house in this development, including mine. And when the Terrence savings came in, they had a limit. They could only loan you 80%. And so Paul took care of the rest of it by boosting the price of the house that he never got any money for. It was just the price of the house went up. Tarrant gave you 80%, and that ended up to be about 87 or 87% of the loan value that you had. So over a period of time, he was able to do that. He did that from my house, and I know he did it from other houses. The only thing that I want to say at the end of the line, that we're all here in this marvelous development, and was put here by one man.
That's true. But the way we got our house built, we told him that, we would like to build in here, but we'd have to sell our house before we could, buy one in here. He says, "Well, that's okay. We'll build a house, and when you sell your house, why, you can pay me." So luckily we didn't have any problem selling our house, so it worked out all right. But like I was saying, that our house is built out of the Fort Worth Stockyard paving brick.
Great. When did you see when did you first see the house that you might be moving into?
Well, he bought the lot without ever consulting me or mentioning it at all. I didn't know anything about it until much later. Thing I remember that nobody has mentioned are the beautiful fountains that were original. The little island as you come in had a gorgeous fountain in it. Sam, I'm sure you're all into that. And where the gazebo is, there was another beautiful fountain. And vandals kept tearing them down.
Is that what ended up happening
Yeah.
to him?
Oh, they kept pouring soap. You know, it was floating with soap.
So there's a lot of bubbles a lot of times.
Do y'all know
I
about?
remember they built rebuilt the first one, the entrance island, rebuilt it, and then they just kept demolishing it, so.
Oh, that's a shame.
The decision was, I guess, we just can't have fountains here, because there was a lot of vandalism, like you remember back in the early days, about things like that. But when you turned off Pipeline in the beginning, it was like your own private little world to me.
You know, that big wide street
Yeah.
and all the trees and the hills.
Yeah, it was like our own private little enclave.
It still feels that way.
Still feels that way when we
Yeah.
drive in.
I now call it the Garden District of Euless.
That's great.
Do you know about the year that the fountains were removed?
Pardon me?
Do you know about the time the fountains were finally taken out? Do you know the?
I don't, do you remember when they were taken out?
Have any idea?
They started demolishing soon after we moved in.
2 or 3 years. they were
Kids
gone.
from other neighborhoods came and did all that. It wasn't too long, Marshall, maybe a couple of 3 years, maybe 2 years, something like that.
I was going over some records, and one of the toughest jobs that I had in my life was coming up with $2,496.23. I found the check here, and I remember how I got the money. I got the money because I didn't have any money in the bank, and I went to the credit union and convinced the guy he ought to give me on my signature. And this is back in the days when credit unions would do that up to a point. So I remember on August 16th, I went to the bank and put $2,500 in that I'd borrowed, so I still wasn't, so I could write this check.
A little trading, huh?
Somebody tell me about what you remember about the builder, about him and what he was about and what he, maybe some of the things that he passed on that you remember about him.
He chewed on a cigar.
He chewed on a cigar.
Never saw him do it.
One thing I did find out about Paul, and in fact this has occurred within the last year, Paul was the distributor for the Star Telegram over in Fort Worth.
Right.
He had all these young men working for him. And there was a man slightly younger than I am. Everybody's younger than I am these days, but and he was one of the delivery boys for Paul Huffines. And he was saying to me that Paul Huffines had done good work by virtue of funding kids going to college and things of that nature. Well, what I found about Paul Huffines was he was a man of his word, but sometimes he would let you know that perhaps you were overstepping his bounds of relationship to him. He kind of kept you away, and I remember the story about the bow windows, and when he said to me, he said, and again, I don't want this to be Semitic in any way, he said, you want those bow windows. You're going to have those bow windows. I said, yes, I am. He said, you're just like a Jew. Now, I don't know if that colors him or not. It was just an expression on his part.
Yeah.
My comment back to him was that was the best compliment that I had in a month.
But he was a kind man too, because some kids got into trouble. I don't know who. They were just a bunch of older boys, and they
lived in the neighborhood?
Yeah.
Okay.
And what was it they did? They put nails in the sewer line, or they did something naughty. Do you remember, Sam? But he sent his helper, and I can't think of his name. Who was
Evil.
Gable.